Thank you for having me. It is an honor for me to be here because I feel like an outsider in this group because I'm not a specialist in economics. I'm an associate professor of foreign languages department. I have been with HSE for 12 years, so I'm not a new faculty, but you can trust me on what I'm going to tell you because I've been teaching it for over 10 years, and the best feedback I receive from my students is when they email me saying that my presentation tips came in handy with their presentations in the United Nations or WTO or in different corporations that they work. So I take it as a very humbling feedback from them. So you can trust me on what I'm going to be telling you. And we have exactly 1 hour, so by 1, I'm determined to finish. And as John said, nothing should stand in your way to lunch. So I'm going to make sure you're going to not feel hungry. And I will leave 10 minutes for questions as well. But before I start, I want to ask you, did anyone have a skydiving experience ever? Could you raise your hands? No. Okay, 1. That's great. So if you have anything ever to contribute, you're welcome. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me during the presentation also, because everything I'm going to be telling you is going to be your home task. All of you have training sessions with me tomorrow. So by the end of my lecture today, you're going to get an assignment and you will have to fulfill it. And within the training session, we're going to take a look at it. So also, you're going to have my slides after my presentation in a Google folder, which the organizers will share with you, but after the lecture, okay? So let's start. The reason why I chose this theme of skydiving is because I view presentation making experience as both exciting, both frightening, dangerous, but in most cases, hopefully landing well, okay? But hopefully. You need to have a certain equipment, and the equipment we're going to work on today would be actually 3 pieces. It's going to be our parachute, which is supposed to be over here, the goggles, and the helmet. Okay, so what are those 3 elements that you need in public speaking to make sure you land well? And also the reason I distinguish public speaking and slides is because usually public speaking might not necessarily need slides. That's why I'm going to talk about slides separately, okay? So first, let's talk about the public speaking, and this is my part 1. And like I told you, it's going to have to comply with this rule of 3. The rule of 3 means that everything you do in public speaking boils down to 3 cornerstones that are called logos, pathos, and ethos. And basically these are your parachute, your goggles, and your helmet. So let's take a look at each of those elements in detail and see how they might potentially help you. So the first element, and this is ethos, and for me, the metaphor-wise, it's your goggles, and that element answers the question why. Why should your audience believe you? Why is it that everyone who is listening to you should actually give you credit for what you're saying? And there are 2 ways to deal with it. There are more than 2 ways, but I will only show you 2 ways. These are your references to your personal expertise or your specialization. In this case, obviously you can say that, well, I have a degree in this field, or I have an extensive work experience in this field. Or you can make references to other scholars or theories, and that's what I tell my students who are only seeking their bachelor's degrees, so they cannot really make references to their own expertise, so they have to refer to other scholars. So that's what your presentation has to include. Ideally, it includes both. So I hope that in your presentations tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, for the whole training session, you're going to have both. Okay? So basically these are your goggles, the glasses that you view your world through, and you view the issue that you're making a presentation through. Okay. The examples, and this particular slide is a very good example of an unfortunate choice of colors, because when I was choosing the colors on my iPad, it did not look like light green. Okay. So that's another lesson that we can learn from this presentation today, is that you have to check your colors before you make a presentation in public. So in green I have the two examples, which I'm going to read to you since I do not expect you to read them. So the first says, as a specialist in behavioral economics, I view this issue in the light of blah, 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 blah. So that might be the reference to your personal expertise, right? And the second example is, I consider this issue within the framework of theory X, which means blah, 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 blah. So that's the reference to other scholars or other theories to make your presentation more credible. Okay? So moving on to that second cornerstone, that second pillar of public speaking is Logos. And Logos asks the question how? How should you organize your presentation in the way that it is coherent? In this particular case, I view it as the parachute, because it helps your audience to navigate through the streams of your consciousness and to make sure that these are not just the stream of consciousness, but an organized body. And the reason I have the rainbow colors is not because I want to hint at a certain community, but because there are seven patterns of organization that I want to show you. And I usually give a separate lecture to my students about patterns of organization. And before we get into them, I want to share my personal experience here. Back in 2003, 4, and 5, I used to work in the reading lab in Palm Beach State College in Florida. And this reading lab was designed for students, and it gave seminars and workshops to every student in the college who was interested in reading, writing, and academic affairs. So the seminar on relationships was the most important one and the most highly populated one, because that's what the patterns of organization show, relationships. So once we called our seminar relationships, the whole college came to listen to what we had to say, and then obviously some of them got disappointed that all we wanted to tell them would be 7 patterns of organizations, not just relationship in the family or in the workplace. So the 7 patterns are definition, list of items, comparison, contrast, cause and effect, illustration, and summary. I want to get into details about those 7 just because I would like to provide you with some tools to frame those, because I'm a language instructor, so obviously that's my job to give my students or my audience some tools. So if we look at pattern number 1, definition, the language that we can use here would be to define, to identify, to characterize the scope, the nature, the meaning of something. Then it might be a good idea in your presentation to outline some characteristics, to determine features, to give a definition. And then the last one that I want to suggest would be to use basic, general, official alternative definition to something. It seems quite trivial that I want to emphasize the idea of a definition, but experience shows that sometimes people are not on the same page when it comes to a certain approach or to a certain phenomenon that you're talking about. That's why it's a good idea to always provide the definition to the key concept that you are focusing on, so as to make sure that you're on the same page with your audience in this case. Then the list of items is the second most important pattern of organization, and the list of items is not the laundry list or not the shopping list that you are making when you want to get some groceries, but it organizes the points of your presentation in the manner that it is easy for the audience to follow. So in this particular case, the golden rule in every presentation is called the rule of three. You have heard about this rule, I'm sure, prior to this. So everything you say should ideally have three components to it, three elements to it, and that's just because three, for some reason, appeals to people's memory and emotions better than two or four. So you can say that my presentation would include several aspects, it will comprise several aspects, or it will be composed of several aspects. And then in between those aspects, you can say in addition, equally important, among other things. The reason I'm showing this language to you is because if you ever videotape yourself, just watch how you make transitions between parts of the presentation, and experience shows that usually people make transitions and then and next. So to avoid these boring phrases, you can say something like equally important or in addition, and that is always just more interesting to watch. So equally important is our next pattern of organization. And next to actually comparison and contrast, and in this particular case I want to draw a distinction between them for the Russian speakers, because in Russian when we say сравнить, we mean both compare and contrast. In English they are sometimes distinguished between, so if we say compare, we mean find similarities. If we say contrast, we mean find differences. So that's important because whenever my students write, I want to compare something, they mean both, but it boils down to the fact that you have to do, you have to use different signal phrases for these two patterns. So when you want to draw similarities of the two objects, you can say in the like manner, in the same way, along the same lines. But when you want to make a contrast, I actually put down that the beloved phrase in John's presentation was in contrast. You used it 3 times, so good. My personal favorites would be at the same time, on the contrary, on the other hand, right? So as to avoid some, again, Russian speaker pitfalls, we don't say on the other side, right? We say on the other hand. Just a side note. So the 5th pattern here would be cause and effect. And again, to avoid repetitions like this leads to, this leads to, this leads to, this leads to, we can use some other alternative verbs like cause, trigger, lead to, or something stems from something, something results from something, something emerges from something. And then, yes, as a result, as a consequence. So my personal favorite from this list is something stems from something, right? It just sounds interesting in my opinion. And then illustration is a very widespread pattern, but the most abused phrase here is for example. I personally knew a student whose nickname was for example, because he abused this transition so much that his classmates actually called him for example. That's not a nice way to correct this mistake. A different approach here would be to use connectors like in particular, namely, or specifically, so as not to abuse the phrase for example. We have 2 more of these boring patterns before we get to something more interesting. So, I'm sorry. Yes, 1 more, sorry. And pattern number 7 is summary, and I was very fascinated to hear that you were interested about how many slides were needed for a summary. It's a good idea that you want to make a summary in the first place, because a lot of people just ignore it and cut off their presentation in, at the point without making any summary at all. So you can say in sum, ultimately, all in all, on the whole, I personally love in essence, in brief, in general, all things considered, right? So again, you're going to have these slides available to you. So if you're interested, you can use them. If not, then we're done with this part. And this is my most favorite. So we have looked at why should the audience believe you? How should you organize your presentation so that the audience doesn't get lost? But that's the most interesting part. What kind of tricks can you use to make your presentation more powerful? And that's what Pathos is all about. Pathos brings emotions into your presentation. Pathos brings personality into your slides, into whatever you're saying. And I would like to suggest 5 different strategies to incorporate pathos. And they are emphatic constructions, hedging strategies, conditionals, parallel structures, and questions. Can you raise your hand if you know what emphatic constructions are? That, okay, 1 person, no, 2 people know, that's great. So I have something to tell you that you might not necessarily know, which warms my heart because I was feeling bad about the fact that you might already be too overqualified for me. So let's take a look at emphatic constructions. Emphatic constructions are specific phrases and the way you construct your phrase so as to make an emphasis on something, to put an emphasis on something. One of my students says empathetic constructions. No, empathy and emphasis are 2 different words, so these are not empathetic constructions, they are emphatic constructions. So basically it boils down to highlighting something, and you can highlight it with reverse order, word order, such as what the author argues is, and that's how you draw attention to this, because instead just a non-emphatic construction would be the author argues blah 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 blah. And so in this case, if you say the author argues that there are no bad students in the world, well, the emphasis is on the second part of the sentence, but in this case you draw the attention to this first one. And I was very happy to hear John mentioning it, that you were referring to the experience when people come to their arguments in the presentation, they lower their voice. Right? So that was very interesting to hear, because this is actually the suggestion to avoid it. Because sometimes you might not necessarily be in control of your voice because nerves take control of you, and you might not, you literally physically start speaking lower. So just to prevent this, you can use emphatic constructions, because that will bring this emphasis, that difference will make the difference, to avoid this weak claims to which John was referring to. So another way to do that was, it is that method that can do something, right? So it is that rainy day that prevented me from doing this research. And the last pattern here would be only by considering something, will it be possible? In this case, you can see inversion, right? So we have an indirect word order in this case, right? And you can say that only by knowing the rules of the presentation can it be possible to master it all, right? So these are just some technical language issues. So I have that one of my favorite exercises from the academic writing course that I'm teaching. So I have these examples without the emphatic constructions, and I would ask the audience in the first row. I'm not asking people at the back to hear, to see this, but let's see how you can turn the non-emphatic construction into an emphatic one. So can I please start with you? Could you read the first sentence for us? So this is the way non-emphatic construction is.
A business requires a healthy reserves account for its long-term viability.
Yes, okay. So make it an emphatic construction using what, and this is this first pattern.
What a business requires. is a healthy reserves account for its long-term viability?
Yes, okay, I think it deserves a round of applause. Yes, John.
I hate to be a spoilsport at this point because you're doing such a great job, but this is one where you and I disagree. I think in almost all those sentences, you should use the direct constructions. The emphatic construction sounds too passive. In fact, foreign students especially overuse this kind of passive construction, and it's exactly what makes them sound stiff and scientific in a bad way.
Okay, look, what business requires, it's not passive, is healthy reserves account, it's not passive either. So this is not passive voice, because I agree with you, and I think you should take into account, because you will be, I mean, you are writing articles already, that passive voice is not preferable and active voice is more preferable in academic writing. It's an interesting concept for Russian speakers, because when we learn English, more time is devoted for passive constructions, right, than active. And then when we start writing academic articles, they tell us, well, active constructions are more preferable. So I would say that, yes, active constructions in academic writing are more appropriate. I'm talking about oral speech right now. I'm not talking about writing. And in the constructions that I showed you, it's not passive. So maybe it's also the matter of taste, and tastes differ. So I would not argue. I also forgot to mention that I'm the author of the debate book series. So if anyone wants to debate with me, you're welcome. I know all the tricks to the debate as well. So just one more example, if we could do that. Could you please take that second one just to see how it works, okay?
The Americans were seeking a fundamental change in the presidential election of 2008.
We want to.
It was a fundamental change that the Americans were seeking in the presidential election of 2008.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. So, did you feel the difference? Right. So again, maybe following John's comment, we can leave it up to you, right? So whether you want to change it, it's up to you. Whether you don't, just make sure that you don't have passive constructions, okay, in your emphatic sentences. So you're going to have these examples in the slides that will be available to you. So we'll just move on. So hedging is the opposite to being emphatic, because when you want to be emphatic, you want to bless you. You want to emphasize the idea. So hedging is different. Hedging is when you want to hedge yourself against criticism of other people, okay? And you can do that with the help of different tools. And the first tool is, you can say, it looks like, it seems like, it appears like, right? And obviously, hedging is not something that you should use while making your claims, because the claim should be strong, right? So hedging is not for claims, but then why do we need hedging? We need hedging for criticism of other people, because if you voice your criticism using hedging, no one can really accuse you of, let's say, ad hominem, or no one can accuse you of hasty generalization of any logical fallacy, because you say it looks like, it appears to me like something, but to you it might appear differently. And that's what happened with John right now, that it looked to me that emphatic constructions are appropriate, while it looked to John that they are not that appropriate, okay? So that hedging strategy literally saves you from being wrong. Okay, so you can apply it while voicing criticism to other people. And the reason I'm telling you this is because in our training sessions, we're going to practice your review presentations, meaning that you will be practicing your reviews of other people's papers, right, that you were supposed to review. So my suggestion is to make use of hedging constructions for that criticism part, okay? So the second strategy here would be, it could possibly lead to In this case, you're hedging against slippery slope or faulty cause and effect, right? Because you say could possibly lead. You don't say that it will lead, right? It could possibly lead. And then the last pattern here would be the findings are likely to show that. So again, you're not saying anything for certain, you're not claiming anything, because it's the way you criticize other people, okay? So again, I have a couple of examples here, right? And I would ask the next person in the first row to take this first example. It comes without hedging, and first read it without hedging.
These new studies into brain function help us to understand cases of slow development in some children.
All right, so in this particular case, what can we accuse the author of without hedging?
It's a strong statement.
No, it is a strong statement, but we can also say that it is. It might be hasty generalization on behalf of the author to say that although the author actually uses some hedging in the word some, right, in some children, so he doesn't claim or she doesn't claim that it's all children, right? But how can we hedge it if we want to?
The studies can help us
right,
to understand
can
cases.
possibly help us, right? So that's easy. We can add could possibly, can possibly, and so on, right? Okay, let's take this fourth one, okay? This one.
Yeah, a medical research will not determine the course of
Autism.
autism. The findings are likely to show that medical research will not determine the course of autism.
Will determine. So we already use one.
Unlikely.
Unlikely, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope you got the feel of the way hedging works from these two examples, and you have more examples in the slides. So, like I told you, emphatic constructions are more appropriate for your claims when you want to make an emphasis on something, and hedging is more appropriate for criticism when you want to criticize someone and hedge yourself against looking bad while you make this criticism. Finally, I want to suggest using conditionals when you're going to be making recommendations, because I was told that part of your assignment in your reviews will be to make recommendations for other people's papers, right? And in this case, you could use conditionals, again, to make it less strong, because who are you to really claim anything about someone else's research? How can you possibly know more about someone else's research than the researcher, him or herself? So that's why I suggest you use conditionals. Conditionals means unreal or future events, and we're just make a condition. So just to remind you that the construction is if you do this, something will happen. After if, we never use will, right? So if you do this. Then another way of saying is provided that the data is accurate, again, no future, okay? The hypothesis should be proved. And yes, linear, unless you, right, consider this limitation, the results may be valid, okay? So again, whenever you make the recommendation, if someone wants to voice them in a more sophisticated manner, please make this recommendation in using a conditional, okay? So the two other strategies that can help you add pathos to what you're saying would be questions and parallel structures. Interestingly enough, Masha used a lot of questions in her presentation, and you should agree that it added a lot of liveliness to what she was saying, right? So like, why is it like that? Blah, 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 blah. How do we approach this? Blah, 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 blah. So like Masha really used a lot of questions in her presentations, and that is a technique that makes you sound more engaging with your audience, okay? So whatever you want to say, first ask a question about it, right? So I suggest starting your questions with why, how, and what. Masha started most of her questions with why, right? So again, draws the attention of the audience if you do that. And finally, parallel structures mean that whenever you give a list of items, make sure they come in one part of speech, Okay? So for instance, at the very top I have all verbs. At the second one would be of phrases with nouns, collection of, application of, discussion of. And then finally I have just nouns, academia, industry, society, right? So again, this rule of 3 is observed in all of those 3, again, examples that I give you. So that brings me to the end of this part 1 about just public speaking, okay? And we still have part 2 about slides. So just to remind what I was saying is that we need first to establish ethos of what we're saying. There is this huge insect flying around. Right, okay. So hopefully it's not going to influence our lecture, but it's huge. So anyway, right, that's a guess. So you need to establish ethos to make you more, your presentation more credible with the help of references to either personal expertise or other scholars. Then you have to provide logos for your presentation to be coherent, right? And finally, you can add pathos with different language strategies such as emphatic constructions, hedging constructions, conditionals, questions, and parallel structures. So, do you have any questions on that part that I was talking about? If not, then we can continue with slides. So, the second part of my presentation talks about that you're not allowed to use sprinkler system to keep your audience alive. Okay, that means that whatever else you can do rather than using the sprinklers or asking your friend insect to join us in the room is not going to help. So we're going to talk about types of slides, rules that we have heard from John. It's an interesting rule, 7.7. I'm going to give you some other ones which do not contradict this one, and some tricks. So the types of slides by objective are the following. First of all, to illustrate, and this is the picture that I hope that you remember from yesterday. So basically, when you use your slides to illustrate something that is easier to illustrate as a graph than in words. So it's easier to show the graph once rather than to explain this graph without showing it, right? So basically, this slide from yesterday was this number 1 type of slide, okay? Number 2 is to read from slides. This is again something that we heard about today, that a lot of professors tend to put whole articles, texts, sentences in their slides. Well, I suggest you stay away from this, and to take it even one step further, please take away full sentences. Okay, so in my classroom, full sentences are not allowed for my students. Obviously, I cannot really forbid it in this setting, but I can just recommend that it would be better if you stay away from it. That was the example of using a conditional in your recommendation, right? I'm sorry?
Do you bite in class?
I try not to. I try not to, okay? Then, the next type of slide is when you use it as a prompter, right? Шпаргалка. So in this case, that's what I usually do, right? So that I don't have to memorize anything and I don't have to have anything in my hands, right? So I put only keywords in my slides, okay? And I suggest that you take advantage of this, but only with keywords. So don't try to put sentences in there. Some people use slides to show their design or painting skills, right? So again, if you have those skills, that's great, but not everyone does, so it might not necessarily be appropriate. And then finally, to entertain with cartoons and drawings, I don't see anything criminal in having a couple of slides in your presentation for entertaining purposes, because it is a good idea to break the ice, not only at the very beginning of your presentation, but in the middle as well, just to make sure the audience is still with you, because it is psychologically hard to perceive numbers for a couple of hours in a row. So if you are attending a content-heavy conference with a lot of numbers, models, research, it's just literally hard to just focus on them. So just one slide or two slides in the presentation with cartoons that are appropriate to your topic would be appropriate. So what are the rules for the presentation making, for the slides making that I want to share? First of all, that your slides ideally should stick to a variety of types, meaning that they should not all be graphs, they should not all be sentences, or they should not all be drawings. So just a couple of graphs, a couple of keywords, a couple of cartoons, so all a mixture of types. Then I would also suggest a 50-50 balance, meaning that 50% of verbal information and 50% of graphic information. Graphic information means any graphs, pictures, drawings, anything, okay? So just again to make sure that verbal information does not take the lead. Then, economy of language. Economy of language means that once you put something in your slide, the keywords, take a look at those words and see if there are any words that you can take out, but the meaning will stay the same. So take out all the unnecessary words, basically brush up whatever you have in the slide. Economy of language is the trait of the highest proficiency level in any language, not only English, Russian, Chinese, anything, because just a personal story as well. I'm also a trainer for a tester for American Councils for Teaching of Foreign Languages. And I was fascinated to know that we kind of think of that there is this advanced level of proficiency of any language, and then there is this superior level. In the British scale, it's called proficiency, but I thought this is it. Well, guess what? The whole fun just starts with that level, because there are more levels from superior above that. And those levels, the next level is called distinguished, and then other levels are not even publicly tested, because you might guess for which purposes they're used. Bottom line to this story is that all native speakers of any language use advanced level. Even if it's your native, in our daily conversations we use advanced level. Only in academic research we elevate to superior or distinguished. So what I'm trying to say is that economy of language, which obviously I did not right now display with my long story, is the trait of the distinguished level of proficiency of any language, be it native or foreign. So the next rule is coherence. Coherence means that the slides should be logically built in the way that the audience does not get lost even if they got distracted. How can you provide that? Please have a title for every slide, meaning that I could have just put this without the word rules, and if someone kind of texted their friend at this moment, they would just look back and like, what is she talking about? Well, every slide should have a title so that there is no doubt in the audience mind what you are talking about at this particular time. And then finally, before we get to that last point, I want to show a real-life example of my student Жанна, who used to work for Roscosmos. Now she works for a private company in Germany who sells satellites. She is in charge of making presentations for this company at different international conferences. She posted this picture on her Instagram like a week ago, and when I saw it, I'm like, this is one perfect slide that I taught her to make, that she's making around the world, enjoying herself basically. So this slide has a title, this slide conforms to the rule of 3, it only has 3 points, it does not have full sentences, only keywords, it has 50% of verbal, 50% of graphic information, and it has references to whatever sources she is using. Yes? Yes.
Yeah, slide bright
This-
distract me from the text
This
on this
one?
slide. Yes.
I'm not sure if it's the slide or the light in the room, because it's a picture, so I have no idea whether... I did not manage to contact her because she's still in that conference, okay? So it might be just a visual effect. But what I'm trying to say is that this is something that I find nicely looking and appropriate looking, even in industry. Might not necessarily fit all academia if you add a lot of pictures, but if you use them wisely, they might work. So finally, something that someone was, not someone, but one of the participants was asking John, hooks. Like, is it appropriate to use hooks at the very beginning of your presentation or during the presentation or after? I would say yes. And hooks are the following. There are several types of hooks, and John used them all, actually. That was basically, like, if you just watch John's presentation from the point of view of hooks, it's absolutely fantastic, just like the rest of the content and form. So the types of hooks are personal stories, right? So we all knew like what happened to who and when and so on, okay? Next type of hook is a question to the audience, right? So again, engaging. Next type of hook would be shocking statistics. So something interesting that you did not expect to find. It might not necessarily be your personal research or your personal data. It might be something relevant to your research, but something interesting. The fourth type of hook would be a quotation from a famous person. And the fifth type of hook would be stating the opposite point of view. So starting from the opposite and then, well, guess what? I'm going to prove the other way around, okay? So those hooks are needed for you to make the presentation more interesting for the audience. And that brings me to the idea that I profess all the time, that your slides should not be self-sufficient without you. And this is usually the case, because you're trying to make slides so self-sufficient that you are not needed. If slides are understandable without you, then why are you here? Why are you trying to say something? Make sure that without you, the slides cannot be understood if you are there as a presenter, okay? And that leads us to the next point, that you have to look one whole with your slides. Because again, in a lot of cases in my students, I can see that they're kind of sitting over there and the slides are living their separate life. They're living their own life. That should not be the case. So if you have slides, please make sure you refer to them verbally, visually, in any possible way, okay? So, finally, the tricks that I want you to use for your training session tomorrow would be the special format called Pecha Kucha. I think we have enough time to actually watch a very short video about it, 6 minutes. But before we do, let me just give a very brief overview of what it is, okay? So Pecha Kucha, the video is going to tell you the origin of this word, but it's 20 slides. The classic version has pictures only, 20 seconds each. They automatically switch. That means you don't need a clicker. And that means it takes over 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 20 seconds, something, okay? This is the classic version, but I suggest using the tailored version in which we're going to have only 15 slides, not 20. We're also going to include, along with pictures, keywords and titles, because I just told you that titles are important. So we are going to try to observe that rule of 50-50, verbal information versus graphic information. Then they will stay 20 seconds each. It will be automatic switch, and automatically they will take, your presentation will take 5 minutes, okay? I personally did see 2 times at international conferences people using this format, And the advantages of this format are the following. So let's say you're allocated 15 minutes of time for your presentation at an international conference. John was absolutely right at saying that your ultimate goal in your presentation is for people to ask questions, right? But in most cases, there's no time left for questions because you take up all of the 15 minutes, or the presenter before you took up your time, or whatever. So if you initially prepare only the 5-minute presentation with just the basics of your research, you open time for questions. Yes, and thank you for signaling that we are right on schedule. So you're opening yourself for questions. Okay. So yes, I did see twice these two cases like that. Obviously, this format is absolutely not appropriate for dissertation defense, right? Because obviously this format means no one can interrupt you because slides switch automatically, right? And before we watch the short video, which is going to be 6 minutes, right? I just want to suggest the layout for your training bites. Could you please upload your Petra Kucha presentations by noon tomorrow to a special Google folder that Marie is going to share with everyone? And the layout that I suggest would be the following. You can dedicate not more than 3 slides to your introduction, not more, so it can be less, right? From 1 to 3. In your introduction, I was told by Yelena that you have to include your vision of the paper you are reviewing. Because sometimes, like Yelena told me, the reviewer and the author are not on the same page about the main goal of the paper. Then, the conclusion also should be not more than 3 slides. Again, you can take only 1, but not more than 3 if you want to voice some final thoughts about the paper. But the 3 major parts of your presentation will be the highlights or the strong points of this research. Not necessarily strong points if you just want to highlight something interesting, something that came to your attention, something you did not expect to see, or anything. So it can be 3 slides or more, or 4, let's put it like that. Then obviously some criticism, right? What do you find weak in this case? And then recommendations, right? So your recommendations to improve this paper. Just to go a little bit back to the public speaking points, here there is going to be an appropriate way, an appropriate place to use emphatic constructions, hedging, conditionals, right? Also, if we have 3 parts, list of items will, as a pattern of organization will work, illustration as a pattern of organization will work, cause and effect, obviously, right? And could you please make sure that the slides turn automatically and upload these slides to Google folder that Masha will share with you. So before I finish, we're going to watch the 6-minute video on what the Petra Kucha is so that you get a feel of what it is. The reason why I want to show you this video is because it might seem that the format itself lends to you speaking fast. No, I want to show that you can speak very slow and still fit into this format, okay? So let's watch this video, and after that I'm going to be open for questions for 10 minutes and we're going to good for lunch, okay?
Hello and welcome to this training bite on Petra Kucha. That's one way to say the 2 words at the top there. They're Japanese, and actually if I was pronouncing them more properly it would be Pechachka. It's a 6-minute 40-second presentation using a form that I think is the best thing since sliced bread. When I first discovered Petra Kucha a few months ago, it gave me so much food for thought in how I did my presentations and how I might help other people also think about their presentations. This is Mark Dytham and Astrid Klein. They're Tokyo-based architects. They came up with Petra Kucha in 2003 as a way for local designers to showcase their work. They also had a multimedia performance space they wanted to get used more. Petra Kucha was born. It's now a worldwide phenomena. Here's a Petra Kucha night in Bogota. The nights happen at over 80 cities around the world, many of them on a regular monthly basis, with around 12 speakers using the Petra Kucha format. I first got thinking about and discovering Petra Kucha through a Facebook group that a client invited me to. It was being set up as a follow-up to a worldwide Train the Trainer event I had helped them organise and run. We were discussing presentations and PowerPoint slideshows in particular. And this guy, Samir Vasta, based in Toronto, who's one of the group, helped me find out more about the Petra Kucha format. Samir has used it with clients, and he says they tend to like the novelty, conciseness and retention of content that Petra Kucha tends to give them. There are lots of examples of Petra Kucha on YouTube. The format lends itself 6 minutes 40 seconds, a wonderful length of time. 20 slides, plenty of different visual material passing in front of you. And that's the rules really. 20 slides, images primarily, and 20 seconds per slide. The slides move on automatically, so that you have to keep your presentation moving as the slides keep moving forward.
Okay, I think we can stop over here. So again, the reason I showed you this video is to illustrate that you don't have to speak fast to fit in those 20 seconds per slide. Okay, so like I told you, we are going to have this tailored version of the Petra Kucha, meaning that you're not going to have only pictures, you're going to have pictures and words and titles to your slides. And the basic rule here would be one idea per slide. And if you want to illustrate your idea, it might be a good idea to use the other slide. Okay? So that brings me to the very end of what I wanted to show you. And the end is the following. That you're going to be evaluated tomorrow, because obviously I'm a foreign language instructor, so I cannot just leave without giving you grades, you know. So I suggest 5 criteria for your presentations tomorrow. We're going to evaluate content, right? Obviously, for clarity, for your contribution, right? And I'm sure you're not going to have any problem with that. Then we are going to take a look at your structure. And in this case, I want to see different patterns of organization, right? Then your language. You can include the emphatics, hedging, conditionals, questions, whatnot. So anything that will make it more lively. Then the slides, right? Different types, different rules. You're welcome to use Jones rule 7x7. So I find it also very appropriate. And then basically a manner of delivery, which includes your eye contact and impact on the audience that you're going to make. Okay, so these are the 5 criteria that I will use to evaluate your public speaking tomorrow, so as to make to find room for improvement if you have any, or find a room for praise, which I'm sure you'll have. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, you're welcome. Do you have any questions on the assignment tomorrow? Yes.
Imagine that if you see some people in the audience, like working computers or watching iPhones during your presentation, do you consider that as a sign that you are doing something not in the best way, or you just ignore that, or you try to communicate with those people? What should be the optimal reaction for that, or just relax?
Right. Okay. That's Masha. That's a very good question. Always debated in any department meeting. Let's see what the audience believes. Could you raise your hand if you are sometimes using your gadgets during somebody's presentations? Thank you. All right. Now, do you use them to message your friends via email or different messengers? Okay. Do you use them to message your friends related to the event that you're in? Related. You see, Masha, that's the answer to your question. Just a couple of people in the audience might use their gadgets to message their friends related to the event. In this particular case, I have no objection. Then, does anyone use their gadgets to do anything irrelevant to the presentation? That's great. Almost everyone. In this particular case, I suggest that you use more hooks. I mean, I try to. I also know that my students sometimes use their gadgets for dictionaries because they try to find unfamiliar words for them. So that's why I do not discourage people from using their gadgets and just hope within my heart that they're just messaging their friends, oh, this is such a great lecture I'm in. Yes?
I have a simple tip I use in very large audiences. Walk very calmly up the stairs while you're talking. And it's a massive, you see all the Facebooks flashing away on the computers while you're walking up. It's really cool. If they do 2-3 times, they stop doing it. And
yeah, that's
actually
great.
Start paying
Perfect.
attention. Move around.
Right, that's
and then
great.
They really don't do it.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'll move
cool.
around. All
right, yeah, definitely worth taking into account. Okay. All right. So I guess we're ready for lunch then?
Can I stress actually, is it clear for you what we're expecting to be done? Yes or no?
Oh, okay, yes.
Should we do our own presentation?
No, only your review. Only the review.
Right.
So if I got it right, each of you is assigned a review of somebody else's paper. So you have to prepare 15 slides, not 20, 15 slides, as in a PechaKucha format, as a review to somebody else's presentation. You are not allowed to use any papers when you present, okay? That means that whatever ideas you want to put into your presentation, they should be in the slides, not in the paper. Yes?
My question is more to the organizers. Are we forced to use this type of the presentation for the actual discussion, or is just for the training purposes?
You're not forced anything, I'm guessing?
Both. The idea is that you first train with Ekaterina, and then you will come up to the audience in normal walk. Yeah.
No, but I guess, listen, if you absolutely hate it after the training, I guess you can negotiate that you can switch the slides yourself, but the idea is the same, that you have a very limited time frame, and to fit in this time frame, right, it might be... Okay. Do you have any other questions? Yes?
Okay, not to use any pictures.
What do you mean, any pictures?
In PechaKucha, I mean, it's heavily relied on the picture. Is it okay not to use any?
All right, the pictures should be relevant to the subject, or if you use them metaphorically, you have to explain this metaphor. So if it's a metaphorical use of a picture, you have to explain why in particular you're showing skydiving people.
My question was, can I not use any picture at all?
So in this particular case, you're breaking the 50-50 rule, meaning that 50% of verbal information, 50% of graphic information.
Yeah, I'm asking not because of difficulty of finding proper picture, but sometimes it's not very suitable for the content. Like, otherwise it will be too childish, or
Okay, but graphic or pictures, they do not mean that they should be pictures. They can be graphs, they can be tables. Okay. So any graphic information includes graphs, tables, pictures, pie charts, so any kind of graphic input.
Okay.
So they might not necessarily be pictures from Google, okay? Sure. But pie charts might just, show something better than just words, Okay, any other questions? Then we're ready for lunch. Thank you very much.